the road from Jack Daniels. We are down the road from me. We stand in the shadow of giants. When craft beer got going, they were competing with large companies that were producing pretty poor beer. So they were able to just improve quality and bring back old styles of beer and really get attention. The big distilleries are making truly excellent product, excellent tasting whiskey, excellent bourbon. So if we made really good traditional Tennessee whiskey, really good traditional bourbon, it'd be still very, very difficult for us to stand out. There'd be no particular reason for someone to pick us up off the shelves rather than one of the existing products we want in the distilleries. So we like being weird. We like doing things that are completely outside the norm that people haven't done before. We try to push the borders of, especially whiskey, using unusual grains, unusual flavors, and unusual techniques to try to express different things that you can't get in a product that's on the shelves. So this was Yazoo Brewery's facility. They were the only production brewery in Nashville for many years. And they got going here when we were trying to get going in Nashville. We got kicked out of Tennessee because state law didn't allow distilling in Davidson County or most of Tennessee. Only 3 counties of the 93 actually allowed distilling. So we wandered off to Kentucky and opened up a distillery there and then started working on changing state laws with a group of other people. When the laws did get changed and we could come back, we had already been working with Yazoo to prototype some stuff, and they were out of space in this facility. So they offered for us to take over their space, take over their original brew equipment, because they needed new equipment at their new space. I said, sure. So we were able to just move in about 5 years ago.
The heart of the distillery. This is a whiskey-only production facility. We don't do any bottling here. We don't make any of our other spirits here. Just whiskey. This is a former brewery. So over there, the room labeled grind room, that is where we take grain and crush it in a roller mill. You can see these bags of grain here. We've got smoked malts, we've got rye, we've got some wheat here. All of these are going to go up the stairs into a little hopper and then get ground and ordered over to this set of tanks here. The one labeled ML, the mash louder ton, is a proper brew kettle. It's got a sieve tray in the bottom. So basically we take ground grain, mix it with water in that contraption that's sitting up top at about 140 degrees, and then we let it rest in the tank for about an hour and a half. Grain is basically starch. Malted grain is sprouted, so it begins to have enzymes that convert starch to sugar. When you take the grain, grind it, stick it with hot water, and let it sit for a while, those enzymes change all of the starch in the seedling to sugar. And basically you end up with grain-flavored sugar water in that tank, and a bunch of ground grain. So we lauter or filter the liquid through, leaving the grain behind, and it goes over to the boil kettle, which is where a brewer would add hops and boil it. We just use it as kind of a resting place for that sugar water grain-flavored liquid. The grain goes out the door and goes to cattle farmers and pig farmers and
happy cows.
The liquid, on the other hand, goes into these guys, which are just stainless steel fermenters. So we've got sugar water, we catch yeast. Yeast takes sugar and eats it and makes carbon dioxide and beverage alcohol. So basically we're making a beer in here unhopped, and it goes from the sugar water to about 8–10% alcohol. We take that liquid and it goes over to the still over there that's all stainless steel except for the condenser. That's called dimples for obvious reasons. And that is our wash still. Whiskey outside of Irish whiskey is distilled twice. The first time you're basically taking beer and you're just concentrating the amount of alcohol in it. So it's a quick distill and you're going from about 8–10% alcohol to about 30–40% alcohol. So we toss things in, we use steam to boil off the alcohol, separate it from the liquid, and we catch that stuff, and that's called low wines. The low wines go into this antique still here. This still is from 1920 or 1921. This is a very popular style of still back in the day, but it's very rare now because most of the stills of this kind got the pickaxe during Prohibition. So this is a pre-Prohibition era still. Basically one big saucer on top and 2 saucers on the bottom held together by pressure. The saucers on the bottom, we drive steam in between, and that steam is the energy that causes the liquid in here. The low wines that boil evaporate go up through and then hit this condenser, which is basically a big water sleeve that cools the vapor back down and causes it to condense. So we're taking about 30% alcohol stuff that is halfway between a beer and a whiskey and pretty awful. And we're distilling it again to about 130, 140 proof. So we're going up to about 65, 70% alcohol. And we're also doing cuts. When yeast ferments, the yeast makes beverage alcohol, but it also makes things like methanol and heavy oils and things that don't taste very good. You can't taste them in beer, but once they're in whiskey, because they're concentrated, they're no good both for your palate or your health. So we're actually doing cuts on the second run. All the higher alcohols we call heads, we toss them. Then we keep the heart of the whiskey, and then we toss the tail. So we lose about 25-30% of the liquid during the run to things that aren't able to be barreled. So the heart of the run goes into these barrels here. So these are charred American oak. We only use new barrels here, as is typical in the States. These are staves that are held together by the pressure of these hoops. There are no nails or anything holding them together. When they were assembled, flame was run through the barrel, and you've got a layer of char on the inside of the barrel, and past that char, you've got caramelized wood sugar. The char basically acts like a Brita water filter. It cleans up the whiskey, and the caramel color, or the caramel, is the flavor and the color that we associate with whiskey. Anything coming off of the still is clear. The caramel of the barrel is what causes whiskey to be brown and gives especially bourbon and sweetness. And then there are other chemicals in the wood from the flame, like vanillins that give vanilla notes, oak flavor, the char itself is flavor. So this is between 30 and 70% of the flavor of a whiskey is actually the wood of the barrel. The grain, especially in an American-style whiskey, the grain is the lesser portion of the flavor, and the wood is the majority of the flavor. So the barrel resting cleans up the spirit, but it also flavors it. For a craft distillery, this is what passes as a rick house. The large distilleries will have several large specialty storage areas specifically for their barrels. We have to use the corner of our actual distillery, but this is where our barrels rest. This is an atmospheric environment. It'll get up to about 110 degrees here in the summer. It'll get down to 30, 40 degrees in the winter. So these barrels go through a lot of temperature changes, which is a part of the aging cycle. Otherwise, just sitting in the barrels and moving in and out the wood and washing out all the chemicals that are in the wood and all the flavors is what goes on here. This is where the whiskey takes on its whiskey character. It goes from moonshine, essentially, to finished product. This is the Bubble Cap, which is the Distillery of the Year award from ADI, American Distilling Institute, which is the group representing small distillers in the U.S. This was award number 94. We're up to 97 awards, so we're almost to 100.